The billionaire watched his fiancée torture the maid on camera. Then he saw the truth, face screaming in fear, broken heart. At first, everyone laughed at her. Then the room went completely silent. Hey, listen, before you scroll past this one, stop. You need to hear it. This story happened inside one of the most expensive homes in Connecticut, in front of 200 guests dressed in silk and diamonds. A maid named Maria was dragged across a marble floor by 3 security guards while a woman in a pink gown pointed her finger and screamed the word thief. Nobody in that ballroom knew the truth. Nobody knew a hidden camera was already recording everything. And nobody, not even the man who owned that mansion, had any idea that when he came home that night, one video file would destroy the life of the woman he was about to marry. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today, and which country do you belong to? Drop it in the comments. I always love reading where you all are from. Today's story is about power, pride, and the quiet strength of a woman nobody thought to protect. It's emotional, it's heartbreaking, and by the end, I promise you'll be thinking about it for days. Let's get into it. Nobody in that mansion knew her name until the night everything changed. Maria Alvarez was 34 years old, and for the last 2 years, she had worked as the head housekeeper at Windermere Estate, one of the largest private homes in Greenwich, Connecticut. She arrived every morning at 6, before the sun had fully risen, and she left long after the chandeliers had been switched off and the last guest car had pulled out of the driveway. She polished floors that cost more than her apartment. She ironed shirts that cost more than her monthly rent. And she did it all without complaint, because Maria had a reason bigger than any paycheck. Her son, Daniel, was 7 years old, and he had been born with a heart condition that required constant monitoring, medication, and, eventually, a surgery that Maria's insurance would only partially cover. Every dollar she earned at Windermere Estate went toward that surgery fund. She kept a small notebook in her purse where she tracked every payment, every bill, every dollar saved. She was close. She was so close to finally being able to afford it. The owner of Windermere Estate was a man named Adrian Whitmore, 34 years old, the CEO of a shipping and logistics company his father had built from nothing. Adrian was not like the other wealthy men Maria had worked for in the past. He remembered her name. He asked about her son. Once, when he noticed her limping from a long shift, he told her to take the rest of the week off with full pay. He wasn't perfect, but he was kind, and in a world of cold marble and colder people, kindness meant everything. The problem was Vanessa. Vanessa Cole was 30 years old, stunning, sharp-tongued, and engaged to be married to Adrian in less than 2 months. She had grown up in old money that had quietly run out years ago, and she guarded her image the way other people guard their children. To the guests who came to Windermere Estate for dinner parties and charity galas, Vanessa was radiant, gracious, the perfect future Mrs. Whitmore. But behind closed doors, when Adrian was traveling for work, Vanessa became someone else entirely. She would snap her fingers at Maria to refill a glass that wasn't even empty. She would drop a stack of folded towels on the floor just to watch Maria bend down and pick them back up. She would call her the help instead of using her name, even after 2 years of Maria working in that house. Maria never said a word back. She needed this job. She needed it for Daniel. That week, Adrian had flown to Singapore for a 10-day business trip to close a major shipping contract. And the moment his private jet left the runway, something in Vanessa's eyes changed. The other staff noticed it too, the head chef, the driver, the 2 younger housekeepers. There was a tension building in that house, quiet and dangerous, like the air before a storm. Vanessa had been planning something. And for reasons nobody yet understood, Maria was standing directly in the middle of it. On the 4th night of Adrian's trip, Vanessa announced there would be an engagement gala at the estate, 200 guests, caterers, a live band, photographers from 3 different magazines. It would be the event of the season. And she wanted everything perfect. She wanted everything flawless. She wanted no room for anyone to embarrass her. What none of the guests, none of the staff, and not even Vanessa herself realized was that 8 months earlier, Adrian had quietly installed a full security system throughout the estate, cameras in every hallway, every main room, even the grand foyer where the party would be held. He had done it after a break-and-scare at a neighbor's house. He rarely checked the footage. He trusted his home. He had no idea that trust was about to be tested in the most painful way of his life. Something was building inside that house, and Maria could feel it long before it happened. 3 days before the gala, Vanessa called a mandatory staff meeting in the kitchen. She stood at the head of the long marble island, arms crossed, designer heels clicking against the floor as she paced. "This gala," she said, "will be photographed by 3 major publications. Every single person in this house represents me, represents this family. I expect perfection. I will not tolerate mistakes." Her eyes landed on Maria and stayed there a moment too long. After the meeting, the head chef, a kind older man named Walter, who had worked at the estate for 11 years, pulled Maria aside. "Be careful this week," he whispered. "She's not herself. Something's got her rattled, and when she's rattled, she looks for someone to blame." Maria nodded, but she didn't fully understand what he meant, not yet. 2 days before the gala, Maria was polishing silverware in the dining room when she overheard something she wasn't supposed to hear. Vanessa was on the phone in the adjoining study, her voice low but sharp with panic. "I told you I need more time," Vanessa hissed into the phone. "The payment is coming. I just need the gala to go smoothly first. I have a plan." There was a pause. "No, he doesn't know anything about the accounts. And he's not going to, because by the time he finds out, I'll have already fixed it." Maria froze, silverware in hand, heart pounding. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. Vanessa owed someone money, a lot of it, and she was hiding something from Adrian. Maria quietly stepped back from the doorway and returned to her work, telling herself it wasn't her business. She had a son to think about. She couldn't afford to get involved in the private affairs of the woman who signed her paycheck. But fate doesn't ask permission. The next afternoon, Vanessa's engagement necklace, a rare emerald and diamond piece worth an estimated $400,000, a Whitmore family heirloom that Adrian had given her the night he proposed, went missing from her bedroom vanity. The house exploded into chaos. Vanessa screamed for the head of security. She screamed for all the staff to be gathered in the main hall. Her face, usually composed and camera-ready, was twisted with something that looked less like grief and more like desperation. "Someone in this house stole it," she shouted, pacing in front of the staff lineup. "And I promise you, whoever did this will regret it." Maria stood quietly at the end of the line, hands folded, saying nothing. She had cleaned Vanessa's bedroom that morning. She had seen the necklace sitting in its velvet box on the vanity at 9 a.m., exactly where it always was. She didn't know it yet, but that simple fact, that she was the last person confirmed to be in that room, was about to be used against her. Vanessa's eyes swept across the staff lineup, and for a long, terrible moment, they stopped on Maria. "You," Vanessa said quietly. "You were in my room this morning." "I was cleaning, ma'am. The necklace was there when I left. I saw it in the box." "Did you?" Vanessa said, and something dark flickered behind her eyes. "That's very convenient, isn't it? You being the last one to see it before it disappeared." The room went silent. Walter the chef stepped forward slightly, as if to defend her, but Vanessa raised a hand to stop him. "Security will handle this," she said. "Nobody leaves this house until that necklace is found." That night, Maria lay awake in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word. She had done nothing wrong. She knew that. But she also knew that in a house like Windmere Estate, the truth didn't always matter as much as who was believed. She had no idea that the missing necklace and everything that would happen the next night had absolutely nothing to do with her, and everything to do with the desperate, cornered woman who was about to destroy her career, her reputation, and nearly her son's future, all to save herself. The night of the gala arrived, and with it, a truth no one in that ballroom was ready for. 200 guests filled the grand foyer of Windmere Estate, women in gowns that shimmered under crystal chandeliers, men in tailored tuxedos, photographers weaving through the crowd capturing every practiced smile. A live string quartet played near the marble staircase. Champagne towers glittered like something out of a fairy tale. Maria worked the event alongside the rest of the staff, carrying trays, refilling glasses, keeping her head down. She hadn't slept. The accusation from 2 nights earlier still echoed in her mind, but she told herself it was over. The necklace hadn't been found on her. Security had searched her bag, her locker, everything. There was no proof. She thought, foolishly, that it was behind her. She was wrong. At exactly 9:47 p.m., in the middle of the crowded main hall, Vanessa Cole stepped onto the small stage set up for the evening's toasts, took the microphone from the band's singer and pointed directly across the room. "I want to say something," Vanessa announced, her voice carrying over the music as it faded out. "2 nights ago, my engagement necklace, a piece that has been in the Whitmore family for 3 generations, was stolen from my bedroom. And tonight, security confirmed who took it." The entire ballroom froze. 200 faces turned toward the stage. "Maria Alvarez," Vanessa said, her finger extending toward the trembling housekeeper standing near the drink station, a tray still in her hands. "The housekeeper. The last person in my room before it disappeared." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Maria's tray slipped from her fingers, glasses shattering against the marble floor. "I didn't take anything," Maria said, her voice shaking, barely audible over the whispers spreading through the room. "I would never." "Security," Vanessa said coldly, cutting her off. "Please escort her out. Now. In front of everyone. I want it understood in this town that theft in this house has consequences." 3 security guards, hired specifically for the event, moved through the crowd toward Maria. She backed away, shaking her head, tears filling her eyes. "Please," she whispered. "Please, I have a son. I need this job. I didn't do this." But the guards didn't stop. They gripped her arms too hard, too rough for a woman who hadn't resisted, who hadn't even raised her voice. Maria's knees buckled as they forced her down, restraining her in the middle of the main hall while 200 guests watched in stunned, uncomfortable silence. Some looked away. A few even laughed nervously, the way people do when they don't know how else to react to cruelty happening in front of them. Phones came out. Flashes went off. Vanessa stood on that stage and watched with something close to satisfaction. What none of them knew, not Vanessa, not the guards, not a single guest in that ballroom, was that the security camera mounted above the main hall entrance, labeled quietly on the monitoring system as CM07, Main Hall, was recording every single second of it in crystal clear high definition. Timestamp running in the corner of the frame. Every word, every scream, every tear on Maria's face. And 9,000 miles away, on the other side of the world, a phone buzzed in a hotel room in Singapore. Adrian Whitmore, exhausted after a long day of contract negotiations, glanced at the notification on his screen out of habit, a routine motion alert from his home's security app. He almost swiped it away without looking. Almost. He almost didn't open it. That single decision would change everything. Adrian sat on the edge of his hotel bed, still in his dress shirt from the day's meetings, thumb hovering over the notification. It was late in Connecticut. He assumed it was just another motion alert from a raccoon near the garden lights, something that happened once or twice a week. But something made him tap it open anyway. The video began to load. At first, he saw the familiar grand foyer of his own home, filled with guests he recognized, business partners, family friends, Vanessa's mother laughing near the champagne table. His own engagement gala, happening without him, exactly as planned. He almost smiled. Then he saw Vanessa step onto the small stage. Then he heard her say the word stolen. Then he saw her point across the crowded room, directly at Maria. Adrian's stomach turned to ice. He turned the volume up, leaning closer to the screen, his heart pounding as he watched his fiancée announce, in front of 200 guests, that his most trusted housekeeper, a woman he personally knew worked double shifts to pay for her son's heart surgery, had stolen a family heirloom. And then he watched the guards move in. "No," he whispered, standing up so fast the desk chair nearly toppled behind him. "No, no, no." He watched Maria's tray fall. He watched her back away, hands raised, pleading. He watched 3 grown men grab a 5'3" woman who wasn't resisting, wasn't fighting, wasn't doing anything except crying and asking them to stop. He watched her forced to her knees on the marble floor of his own home, in front of everyone, while his fiancée stood above her on a stage, watching with an expression Adrian had never seen on her before, something cold, something satisfied. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the phone. He immediately called the estate's head of household staff, a woman named Renata who had worked for his family for 15 years. It was nearly 10 p.m. in Connecticut, but she answered on the second ring, her voice tight with tension. "Mr. Whitmore, Where is Maria?" Adrian said, cutting straight through. "Right now." "Where is she?" There was a pause. "The guards escorted her off the property, sir," Miss Cole instructed. "I don't care what Miss Cole instructed," Adrian said, his voice low and shaking with a fury Renata had never heard from him before. "Find her. Find her tonight. I don't care what it costs, I don't care what time it is. I want her found and I want her told that she has done absolutely nothing wrong. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." "Right away." Adrian hung up and immediately booked the first available flight home. It wouldn't land for another 11 hours. 11 hours in which Maria was somewhere in Connecticut, alone, humiliated, publicly branded a thief in front of the entire town, with no idea that the man who owned that house had already seen everything, and had already begun to understand that his fiancée had lied. Because Adrian remembered something Vanessa didn't know he remembered. He had personally placed that necklace back in its case himself, 3 days before the gala, after having it professionally cleaned as a surprise for the engagement party. He had a text message, time-stamped, to the jeweler confirming pickup. He had a receipt. The necklace had never actually been stolen at all, which meant Vanessa had known that the entire time. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, Adrian couldn't sleep. He opened his laptop, pulled up the full security archive for the estate, and began watching everything from the last 2 weeks. What he found made his blood run cold. For days before the gala, the same day she had claimed the necklace vanished, a hallway camera had captured Vanessa entering her own bedroom at 2:14 p.m., alone, and leaving 11 minutes later carrying a small velvet pouch tucked inside her handbag. The footage showed her walking not toward the household safe, but toward the private garage, where she got into her car and drove off the property for nearly 2 hours. Adrian pulled the estate's visitor log for that afternoon. At 2:40 p.m., Vanessa's car had pinged the gate sensor leaving the property. At 4:35 p.m., it returned. He didn't need much more than that. He already suspected where she had gone: a jeweler, a pawnbroker, someone quiet and discreet, someone who wouldn't ask questions about a woman selling a rare heirloom emerald necklace for cash. He kept watching. 2 days later, more footage, Vanessa in the study, door partially open, on the phone, her voice tense. Adrian couldn't make out every word, but he heard enough. Numbers. A deadline. The phrase, "before he finds out." Piece by piece, a picture was forming, and it was worse than Adrian could have imagined. Vanessa wasn't just cruel to staff behind closed doors, something he was already ashamed he hadn't paid closer attention to. She was in serious financial trouble, debts he knew nothing about, and she had sold his family's heirloom necklace to cover it. Then, needing a way to explain its disappearance before the engagement photos were published in 3 national magazines, she had staged a theft. And she had chosen Maria to take the fall. Not because there was any evidence. Not because Maria had done anything wrong. But because Maria was quiet, powerless, easy to blame, and unlikely to have the resources to fight back. Adrian thought of every small kindness Maria had shown his home over the past 2 years, remembering his father's birthday before anyone else did, quietly leaving his favorite tea on his desk during stressful weeks, never once complaining despite clearly working herself to exhaustion. He thought about the photo he'd once seen on her phone, a small boy with a bright, gap-toothed smile, and Maria's voice cracking slightly as she said, "That's Daniel. He's my whole world." And he thought about that same woman being dragged to her knees in his home, in front of 200 people, for a crime that had never even happened. Somewhere over the ocean, In seat 2A of a plane he couldn't will to fly faster, Adrian Whitmore made a decision. This wasn't just going to be corrected quietly. This wasn't going to be handled with a private apology and a severance check to make the problem disappear. Vanessa had humiliated an innocent woman in public, in front of the entire community, on camera, for the entire world to eventually see. So the truth was going to come out exactly the same way. In public. In front of everyone. While Adrian's plane crossed continents, Maria sat on the edge of her bed in her small apartment, still in her uniform, mascara dried in streaks down her face, staring at nothing. Her phone had been buzzing all night. Not calls from Windermere Estate, nobody from the house had reached out, not yet. It was worse than that. Someone at the gala had recorded the humiliation on their phone and posted it online. By midnight, it had thousands of views. By 2 a.m., it had tens of thousands. Comments were split between people mocking her and a smaller number defending a woman they had never met. Her sister, Elena, sat beside her, arm around her shoulders. "You have to fight this," Elena said gently. "You didn't do anything." "Fight it with what?" Maria whispered. "A lawyer?" "I don't have money for a lawyer, Elena. I barely have money for Daniel's surgery. If I lose this job, if this follows me, no other family will hire me. Who wants a maid accused of theft?" In the next room, 7-year-old Daniel slept, unaware that the fund his mother had spent 2 years quietly building, dollar by careful dollar, had just been placed in terrible danger, not because of anything he did, not because of anything Maria did, but because of a woman who needed a scapegoat. Maria pulled out the small notebook she kept in her purse, the one where she tracked every dollar saved toward his surgery fund. $14,220. They needed $18,000. She had been so close. Now, without a job, without a reference, she didn't know how she'd ever get there. She thought about calling Mr. Whitmore directly. He had always been fair to her, always treated her like a person and not a piece of furniture. But he was in Singapore, thousands of miles away, and even if she reached him, why would he believe his housekeeper over his own fiancée? People like Adrian Whitmore didn't choose the maid over the woman they were about to marry. That wasn't how the world worked. Not in her experience. So instead, quietly, without telling her sister her full plan, Maria made a decision of her own. She would leave. Not run from guilt, she had none, but from the shame, the videos circulating online, the impossibility of ever walking through that town again with her head held high. She began packing a single suitcase before dawn, thinking she and Daniel would go stay with a cousin 2 states away, start over somewhere nobody had seen that video, somewhere Daniel wouldn't overhear whispers about his mother being a thief. She had no idea that at that exact moment, a car was already speeding from the airport toward her apartment. She had no idea Adrian Whitmore hadn't slept in over 20 hours, had barely spoken during his entire flight, and had gone straight from the airport tarmac to his car without even stopping at his own home. She had no idea that the man who owned Windermere Estate already knew the whole truth, and was terrified he wouldn't reach her in time. Adrian burst through the door of Windermere Estate just after 7 a.m., still in yesterday's clothes, unshaven, eyes bloodshot from the flight. Renata met him in the entryway, and before she could even greet him, he asked the only question that mattered. "Where is she? Did you find her?" "We found her address, sir, but—" "Take me there. Now." But first, there was something he needed to do. Vanessa was already awake, sitting in the sunroom in a silk robe, sipping coffee as though the previous night had simply been a minor inconvenience now behind her. She looked up when Adrian entered, and for the briefest second, something flickered across her face, not guilt, but calculation. "Adrian, you're home early. I saw the footage," he said quietly. "All of it. The gala. And the 2 weeks before it." Vanessa's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. "I saw you leave with the necklace 4 days before it disappeared. I saw you drive to that pawn shop on Route 9. I have the receipt from the jeweler proving I had it cleaned and returned it myself, 3 days before you claimed it was stolen. I heard your phone call about needing money before I found out." The color drained from Vanessa's face, but she recovered quickly, the way people do when they've spent a lifetime talking their way out of consequences. Adrian, please, let me explain. I got into some debt, yes, but I panicked. I didn't know what else to do, and that woman was simply convenient. She was going to be fine. I never meant for it to go that far. She was on her knees, Vanessa. In our home. In front of 200 people. Because of a lie you told to protect yourself. She's the help, Vanessa snapped, some of the mask finally slipping. Do you understand what would have happened to my reputation if people found out I sold a family heirloom to cover a debt? Do you know what that would have done to us, to this wedding, to your business partner's confidence, to everything we've built? We haven't built anything, Adrian said, his voice steady now, quiet in a way that was somehow more frightening than shouting. You've been planning a wedding to a bank account. I don't think you've ever once loved me. And I know for certain you've never once seen the people who work in this house as human beings. Vanessa's eyes filled with furious tears, but Adrian was already turning away. The engagement is over, he said. You have until the end of the day to remove your belongings from this house. And Vanessa, theft is still theft, even when you frame someone else for it. My lawyers will be in touch. He didn't wait for her response. He was already walking back out the door, phone in hand, address of a small apartment 2 towns over pulled up on the screen, praying he wasn't too late. The knock on Maria's door came just after 8 a.m., right as she was zipping the last of Daniel's clothes into a duffel bag. Elena answered it, and her breath caught when she saw who was standing there, a tall man in wrinkled travel clothes, eyes exhausted but urgent, standing on their small apartment's doorstep like he'd run the whole way there. Mr. Whitmore? Elena said, stunned. Maria appeared behind her sister, and when she saw Adrian standing there, something inside her chest tightened. Shame flooded through her first, the memory of being dragged to her knees, of his fiancée's voice announcing her a thief, before something else took over. Confusion. Wariness. Mr. Whitmore, I don't understand. I saw everything, Adrian said, before she could say another word. The security camera in the main hall. I watched it from my hotel room in Singapore. I saw Vanessa accuse you. I saw those men put their hands on you. I saw all of it, Maria, and I am so sorry. Maria's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for hours. You believe me? I don't just believe you, Adrian said. I have proof. I had that necklace cleaned myself 3 days before the gala. I have the receipt. I have footage of Vanessa selling it herself to cover a debt she never told me about. She lied to protect herself, and she used you to do it because she thought no one would ever question her over you. Maria pressed a hand to her mouth, tears finally spilling over, not from sadness this time, but from something closer to relief, so overwhelming it nearly buckled her knees the same way those guards had the night before. I was packing, she whispered. I was going to leave town. I thought no one would ever believe me over her. You're not leaving, Adrian said firmly. Your job is waiting for you, if you still want it, though after everything, I would completely understand if you never wanted to walk back into that house again. But Maria, I need you to know something else too. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. This isn't charity, and it isn't guilt money, though God knows I feel guilty enough for not seeing what was happening under my own roof. This is what you're owed for 2 years of running that household better than anyone I've ever employed, plus what should have been paid to you the moment my fiancée put her hands, and other people's hands, on you without cause. Maria unfolded the check with trembling fingers and had to sit down on the apartment steps when she saw the number. It was enough, more than enough, for Daniel's surgery. And then some. Mr. Whitmore, I can't accept. You can, he said gently. And you will. Because what happened to you last night was not okay, and no amount of money fully makes up for public humiliation, but this is where we start. He paused, glancing past her into the small apartment, where he could just make out a little boy peeking curiously around the corner. Daniel. The boy with the gap-toothed smile from the photo. There's one more thing, Adrian added. What happened to you happened in front of 200 people, and now online, in front of thousands more. So the truth is going to come out the same way. Publicly. If you're willing. 6 days later, Windmere Estate hosted its second event of the season, though this one bore no resemblance to the gala before it. There was no live band, no champagne towers, no photographers hired to capture glamour shots for magazines. Instead, Adrian Whitmore stood at a small podium set up in the same main hall where Maria had been forced to her knees less than a week earlier, addressing a room filled with the same community members, business partners, and, this time, several local journalists he had personally invited. Maria stood beside him, dressed not in her uniform but in a simple, elegant navy dress Elena had helped her choose, her chin lifted, her hands steady for the first time in days. 6 nights ago, Adrian began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. Many of you were standing in this exact room when my former fiancée, Vanessa Cole, falsely accused this woman, Maria Alvarez, of theft. You watched her be forcibly restrained in my home for a crime she did not commit. Murmurs rippled through the small crowd. I want to be completely clear about what actually happened, Adrian continued. Miss Cole sold my family's heirloom necklace herself to cover a personal debt and staged its disappearance to protect her own reputation. When it became clear she needed someone to blame, she chose the person she believed had the least power to fight back. He gestured beside him. Maria has worked in this house for 2 years with more integrity, more dedication, and more grace than most people I've ever met in business. She has done nothing wrong. Not that night, and not in the 2 years before it. The apology owed to her is not mine alone to give, but I am giving it anyway, publicly, in the same room where she was harmed, because that is the very least she deserves. He turned to Maria. I'm sorry for what happened in this house and for not seeing it happening under my own roof until it was almost too late. Maria's eyes glistened, but she held her composure, addressing the room herself for the first time. Thank you, she said simply. I've spent 2 years believing that if I just worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, and never complained, I'd be safe. What happened to me proved that isn't always true. But what Mr. Whitmore has done this week proved something else, that there are still people willing to stand up and tell the truth, even when it's easier not to. The room, which had laughed nervously 6 nights earlier while watching her humiliation, now rose in a slow, spreading applause. Later that week, formal charges were filed against Vanessa Cole for fraud and theft related to the sale of the necklace. The video of Adrian's public apology and correction spread even faster than the original clip of Maria's humiliation ever had, but this time, it wasn't mockery filling the comment sections. It was an outpouring of support, strangers from across the country sharing their own stories of being wrongly blamed, wrongly silenced, wrongly overlooked. And in a small apartment 2 towns over, 7-year-old Daniel underwent successful heart surgery 11 days later, his mother sitting beside his hospital bed the entire time, notebook finally closed for good. A year is a long time, and yet somehow, not nearly long enough to fully capture everything that changed after that night. Maria did return to Windmere Estate, though not as a housekeeper. Adrian, humbled by everything the past year had taught him about the people quietly holding his life together, offered her a new position, head of household operations, overseeing staff welfare, fair scheduling, and fair treatment for everyone who worked under that roof. Nobody in that house would ever again be dismissed, blamed, or silenced without someone listening first. Maria made sure of it personally. Daniel, now 8, was healthy, running across the estate's back lawn most afternoons after school, his laughter echoing off the same marble walls that had once witnessed his mother's worst night. Adrian had grown fond of the boy, teaching him to skip stones across the estate's small pond on weekends, something Maria watched from the kitchen window with a warmth she hadn't expected to feel again so soon. There were quiet moments neither of them had planned for, a shared cup of coffee in the early morning before the rest of the house woke up, an unspoken understanding forming slowly, built not on the grand gestures of the wealthy world Adrian came from, but on something steadier. Respect. Honesty. The kind of connection that doesn't announce itself with a diamond necklace or a magazine photo shoot, but grows quietly, the way real things usually do. Vanessa Cole's case moved through the courts that year, her name quietly disappearing from the social pages that had once celebrated her. What she had built on lies eventually cost her everything she'd been so desperate to protect. If there's one thing this story leaves behind, it's this: the people who quietly hold our lives together, who work the early mornings, the long nights, the thankless hours, deserve to be seen, believed, and protected, not because it's convenient, but because it's right. Power without kindness is empty. And sometimes, the truth needs nothing more than a single camera, a little courage, and one person willing to make it right. If this story touched you, give it a like, subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always finds its way to the light. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.